In November of 2024, the police department in a small low-country town sent out a warning telling everybody who lived there to secure their doors and windows overnight. There was no man with a gun. 43 monkeys had gotten out of the research laboratory at the edge of town, and it took more than 2 months to get all of them back. That's the one you're allowed to laugh at. These are 12 South Carolina towns so dangerous that even the locals avoid them after dark, and the monkeys are about as light as it gets. Further down, there's a town that ran a speed camera on Interstate 95 until the state Senate voted 40-0 to shut it down, and a town square where a black pastor ended up legally owning the building that used to be a Klan museum because the Klansmen signed the deed over to him. There's a police chief who shot a man to death in a town hall parking lot over a broken taillight. And at the top of this list, there's a town of 3,000 people where 7 men were killed in a single night, and for almost 8 hours, nobody went in after them. You're going to get the crime numbers on all of these. You're also going to get the part that videos like this one always leave out, which is why those numbers can be close to meaningless in a town this small. Number 12 is Ridgeland. You can drive the entire town limits of Ridgeland in about 7 minutes on Interstate 95, and for a while, those 7 minutes were the most expensive stretch of road on the East Coast. Ridgeland is the seat of Jasper County, about 20 miles north of the Georgia line, and in August of 2009, it did something no other town in America was doing. It parked a van on the interstate with a speed camera inside it, run by a private contractor, and started mailing tickets, not to locals, to the people driving through. Average fine around $133. In 8 months, it brought in roughly $250,000. It was the only device of its kind on about 2,000 miles of open interstate between Canada and Miami. The state attorney general had already said in an opinion that this wasn't legal. Ridgeland did it anyway. Mayor Gary Hodges said the quiet part out loud. "We don't need anyone's approval to enforce the law in Ridgeland." The legislature disagreed. In 2011, the state Senate voted 40-0, and South Carolina passed a law banning any ticket issued solely on photographic evidence. State Senator Larry Grooms put it about as plainly as a politician can. "We're absolutely shutting it down," he said. "I don't want South Carolina to become the nation's speed trap, so nobody in Ridgeland's going to hurt you." What happened here was that a town looked at 7 minutes of federal highway, saw a revenue stream, and kept running it until the legislature took the option away. Keep that in mind as this list goes on, because in South Carolina, the thing that ends up hurting people is very often wearing something official. Number 11 is Yemassee. There are roughly 6,700 monkeys living about a mile from the middle of this town, and most of the country has never heard of the place. Yemassee sits on the line between Hampton and Beaufort counties, straddling Highway 17A, about 50 miles northeast of Savannah. Just under 1,100 people live here, which means the primates outnumber the residents 6-1. On a 2-lane road just outside town sits the Alpha Genesis Primate Research Center, and at its federal inspection in the spring of 2024, it was housing 6,701 animals. That November, a caretaker left the doors unsecured, and 43 young rhesus macaques walked out. 25 were back within the weekend. 18 were still loose 6 days later, bedding down in the trees along the fence line at night. The last 4 weren't recovered until late January, which is more than 2 months of a small South Carolina town going to bed with monkeys in the yard. The company's chief executive, Greg Westergaard, was not especially alarmed about it. "They were just being goofy monkeys," he said, jumping back and forth playing with each other. Here's the part that stays with me. This wasn't the first time. 19 got out in 2016. 11 more went through a broken chain-link fence in 2022. A congresswoman eventually demanded a federal briefing on the facility's history. So when the police in Yemassee ask you to lock your windows after dark, they aren't being dramatic about it, they're being specific. That's the last time anything on this list is going to be even slightly amusing. The next town had something sitting on its public square for 16 years that nobody could get rid of. Number 10 is Lawrence. There is a theater on the public square in Lawrence with a marquee out front, the way there is in 100 Southern County seats. For 16 years, that building housed a store and museum run by the Ku Klux Klan. It opened in March of 1996, called itself the Redneck Shop, and sat on the main square of the county seat in a town of about 8,000 people. It was run by a former Klan leader named John Howard and a younger man named Michael Burden. And then something happened that's genuinely hard to believe. Burden left the Klan. He had nowhere to go. He was taken in by a black pastor named David Kennedy of New Beginning Missionary Baptist Church, who fed him and housed him. And in 1997, the building was signed over to Kennedy's church for $1,000, with a clause that let the shop keep operating rent-free while its operator lived. So for another 15 years, a black congregation legally owned a Klan museum it could not evict. The litigation ran 4 years. A circuit judge finally awarded the church full ownership, and the shop closed in May of 2012. The building is now part of the Echo Project, and in 2023, the National Park Service added it to the African American Civil Rights Network. Reverend Kennedy never framed it as a victory over anybody. "I don't want that business there," he said. "Racism and hatred, they are both destructive and they have no future. But love and kindness, they have a future. Nobody in Lawrence is going to bother you. But for 16 years, if you had a black family driving through and looking for a place to stop, the building on the main square was a Klan shop, and everybody in town knew it." Number 9 is Cottageville. About 2 miles outside Cottageville in Colleton County, there's a dirt road running back through the trees. On the 16th of May, 2011, a police officer named Randall Price shot and killed the town's former mayor on it. Bert Reeves was unarmed. Price was on duty but had not made a lawful stop. He never sounded a siren. He never turned on his dash camera. And Cottageville is a town of about 800 people, so this was not a stranger shooting a stranger. Everybody in that town knew both men. Then the officer's record came out. Price had reportedly been fired from at least 6 different South Carolina law enforcement agencies before Cottageville hired him. In 2014, a federal jury awarded the Reeves estate $97.5 million. Put that next to the population, 800 residents, $97.5 million. The state's municipal insurance fund eventually settled for $10 million, and the South Carolina Supreme Court was still working through the coverage questions as recently as 2021. For years, there was a memorial sign for Reeves out on the highway through town, where anybody driving past would see it. A town of 800 people hired a man 6 other departments had already let go, gave him a badge and a car, and sent him out on the roads at night. The next town is where you get the thing promised at the start, and it's the part that separates this from every other video on the subject. Number 8 is Lake City. This is the entry where the numbers have to get explained, because Lake City is where they matter most. Lake City sits in Florence County, where Highway 52 meets Highway 378, and it has real, documented, ongoing gun violence. In recent years, the town has lost people to shootings, including a well-known local businessman named Fernando Barr, who most people around there called Tick. Several of those shootings happened at night. All of that is true, and none of it needs softening. What does need explaining is the crime rate, because a rate per 100,000 residents does not mean what it sounds like in a town this size. In a town of 2,000 people, one violent crime equals a rate of 50 per 100,000. 4 crimes equals 200. The national violent crime rate in 2024 was about 359 per 100,000. So in a town that small, 7 or 8 bad incidents in a year is all it takes to look worse than the national average on paper. Take a real South Carolina example. There is a small town in this state that reported 2 murders in 1 year. Because only about 3,000 people live there, that works out to a murder rate of 65 per 100,000, which is roughly 13 times the national rate. 2 funerals, and on paper the town looks 13 times worse than the country. The FBI has an official policy against ranking towns this way. Their own guidance says data users should not rank localities, because there are many factors that cause the nature and type of crime to vary from place to place. They warn that doing it anyway creates misleading perceptions that adversely affect communities and their residents, which is exactly what most videos like this one do. So for the rest of this list, the story comes first and the number comes second. And where there is a rate, you are getting the raw count that produced it. Anybody can make a town of 2,000 look like a war zone with a calculator. What nobody can do is make up the names. Number 7 is Utahville. Bernard Bailey was 54 years old, a retired corrections officer, and he was shot to death in the parking lot of Utahville Town Hall on the 2nd of May 2011. The man who shot him was Richard Combs, the police chief, and the only full-time officer this town of roughly 300 people had. The whole thing started over a broken taillight. Combs had stopped Bailey's daughter Brianna months earlier and written her a ticket. Bailey came to town hall about it. Combs later tried to serve him with an obstruction warrant that prosecutors would eventually describe as trumped up, and Bailey ended up dead in the parking lot, unarmed. The first murder trial, in January of 2015, ended with the jury hung 9-3 in favor of conviction. The second hung 2. That September, Combs pleaded guilty to misconduct in office and got 10 years, suspended to 1 year of home detention and 5 years probation. Solicitor David Pascoe did not dress it up. Bernard Bailey was murdered for a broken taillight, he said. Gene Davis Capers, who ran the local branch of the NAACP, put the town's position in one sentence. "This goes to show we have a lot of work still to do in the South," she said. Utahville has about 300 residents and sits out near Lake Marion on the Highway 6 corridor, and it's exactly the sort of quiet place people move to when they want quiet. For years, the only full-time police officer those 300 people had was the man who shot Bernard Bailey in the parking lot. If this is the kind of thing your real estate agent never brings up, put the town you're from or the town you're looking at in the comments. I read them, and the local corrections are usually better than my research. Stay with me, because everything from here down involves somebody dying. Number 6 is Florence. On the 3rd of October 2018, officers went into a quiet residential subdivision on the edge of Florence to serve a search warrant, and a man opened fire on them with a high-powered rifle before they reached the door. 7 officers were shot. 2 of them died. The man was Frederick Hopkins, 74, a disbarred lawyer and Vietnam veteran. The warrant was for his son Seth, over child sex abuse allegations Seth later admitted to. Hopkins had elevation, cover, and a clear field of fire. The officers coming up the drive had none of it. Sergeant Terrence Caraway of the Florence Police Department, a 30-year veteran, was killed that day. Investigator Farrah Turner of the Florence County Sheriff's Office died 19 days later, after more than 9 surgeries and amputations. The standoff ran roughly 2 hours. An armored vehicle had to be brought in to drag the wounded out of the yard. Sheriff Kenny Boone described the problem in one line that tells you everything about that afternoon. He had an advantage, he said, and the officers couldn't get to the ones that were down. Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott, who has been doing this a very long time, called it the largest crime scene he had ever seen. Frederick Hopkins pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in October of 2023. Seth Hopkins got 20 years. The Post and Courier called it the most devastating blow to South Carolina law enforcement in recent memory, and I'll use their words rather than mine, because that is a claim worth getting exactly right. A stretch of highway through Florence carries Farrah Turner's name now. Thousands of people drive it every day without knowing whose it is. Everything from here down happened to somebody who had done nothing at all. Number 5 is Batesburg-Leesville. On the 12th of February 1946, a black Army sergeant named Isaac Woodard was pulled off a Greyhound bus in this town hours after his honorable discharge, still wearing his uniform. He was 26 years old, and he had served in the Pacific. The police chief, Linwood Shull, beat him at the bus stop and drove the end of a blackjack into his eyes. Woodard was permanently blinded. He never saw anything again. An all-white jury acquitted Shull in about half an hour that November. Batesburg-Leesville sits on Highway 1 in Lexington County, about 30 miles west of Columbia, two towns whose business districts are roughly 100 yards apart. In 1946, it was just Batesburg. About 5,000 people live there now. What happened next is why the town belongs on any honest list about danger in this state. The case reached President Truman and fed directly into his decision to desegregate the armed forces in 1948. It also reached a federal judge in Charleston named Waddies Waring, who read the file and was never the same afterward. A sitting federal judge in this state has since written a book about it. There is a historical marker in Batesburg-Leesville now. The town put it up. That took 73 years, and it is more than most towns manage. A man in uniform at a bus stop at night in a town of a few thousand people, and the most dangerous thing in that town was wearing a badge and a chief's stripes. Number 4 is North Charleston. North Charleston isn't a town, and that's worth saying out loud. About 115,000 people live there, which makes it one of the largest cities in South Carolina, so it doesn't really belong on a list about small towns. It belongs on this one anyway, for a reason that has nothing to do with its size. On the 4th of April 2015, an officer named Michael Slager pulled Walter Scott over in North Charleston for a broken brake light. Scott ran. Slager shot him 5 times in the back and killed him. What made this different from 100 other cases is that a man named Faden Santana was walking past with a phone, and he filmed it. The video did not match the officer's account of what had happened. It also appeared to show Slager dropping his taser next to the body. The state murder trial hung in December of 2016. In May of 2017, Slager pleaded guilty to a federal civil rights violation, and that December a federal judge sentenced him to 20 years, ruling that the killing amounted to second-degree murder plus obstruction. It is one of the longest sentences an American police officer has received for an on-duty killing. Walter Scott's brother Anthony spoke afterward. "We are hurt," he said, "and we do have some type of passion for the Slager family in that they have to suffer as well." His brother had been shot in the back, and he was talking about the other families suffering. The mayor's summary was 3 words. The system worked. It worked because a stranger on a sidewalk happened to be holding a phone. Faden Santana thought about deleting the video and said later he was frightened of what might happen to him for having it. Everything on this list comes out of a record somebody had to create. In North Charleston, that record is 90 seconds of shaky footage from a man walking to work who decided not to keep walking. Number 3 is Hampton. For 87 consecutive years, one family in this county held the office that decided who got prosecuted in 5 South Carolina counties and who did not. 3 generations of Randolph Murdaughs held the solicitor's post for the 14th Circuit, covering Allendale, Beaufort, Colleton, Hampton, and Jasper. The first was elected in 1920. The last left office in January of 2006, 87 years. Hampton is the county seat, about 2,700 people, sitting where Highway 278 crosses Highway 601, roughly 18 miles west of Interstate 95. The family law firm took up most of a city block downtown and did not need a sign on it. In March of 2023, Alex Murdaugh was convicted of murdering his wife Maggie and his son Paul and sentenced to life in prison. That conviction has been through appeal, which is worth stating plainly rather than skipping. Around it sit the others. Mallory Beach, 19 years old, killed in a boat crash in 2019. The family housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield. A young man named Stephen Smith, whose death remains an open investigation, and I am not going to tell you it's connected, because nobody has proven that it is. Millions of dollars taken from the firm's own clients, many of them people who had just lost somebody. The part that matters here isn't the trial. It's what 87 years of that did to the county. A Hampton County native named Ben Fennell described it about as carefully as anyone has. I think in Hampton County we had a family, or we had a group, that sort of controlled the destiny of people, he said. A local attorney used two words: they are kings. And a reporter who came down to Hampton to work the story found that the most common response, over and over, from people who did want to talk, was a question. You're not going to quote me, are you? Nobody in Hampton County was afraid of walking home at night. They were afraid of being on the record. The next one is the only entry on this list where the phrase "after dark" means exactly what it says. Number 2 is Columbia. Columbia isn't a town either. It's the state capital, about 136,000 people. But nothing else on this list earns the words "after dark" the way this one does. Around 2 in the morning on the 30th of March, 2019, a University of South Carolina senior named Samantha Josephson left the 5 Points Bar District and got into a black Chevrolet Impala she believed was her rideshare. It was not. The driver, Nathaniel Rowland, had activated the child safety locks. She could not get out. Her body was found later that day by turkey hunters in Clarendon County, about 65 miles east of where she got in the car. She had been stabbed roughly 120 times. She was 21 years old and had already been accepted to law school. Rowland was arrested the next day after going back to 5 Points. He was convicted in July of 2021, sentenced to life without parole, and his appeal was denied in August of 2024. Judge Clifton Newman, sentencing him, said this: "All roads led to you. Every speck of evidence led to you." Her mother Marcy spoke at the trial. "Her dreams were my dreams," she said, "and her death was my death. What came out of it was law." South Carolina passed the Samantha L. Josephson Ride-Sharing Safety Act that same year, requiring illuminated signs on rideshare vehicles. In January of 2023, a federal version called Samy's Law was signed. 5 Points is 2 blocks of bars full of college students on a Friday night, in a city most people in this state consider perfectly safe. And the most dangerous thing there was an ordinary car at the curb with its engine running. Number 1 is Bishopville. On a Sunday evening in April of 2018, in a maximum security prison outside a town of 3,000 people, fighting broke out that would kill 7 men and send about 22 more to the hospital. It started around 7:15 that night. The prison was not secured until 2:55 the following morning. Nearly 8 hours. For almost all of that time, no officer went inside. Lee Correctional Institution sits out in the flat farm country just outside Bishopville, the seat of Lee County, a few miles off Interstate 20. Lee County is the 5th least populous county in South Carolina. Poverty runs near 30%. The prison is the biggest thing in it and has been since it opened in 1993. A regional tactical team was activated at 25 past 8 that night. Staff waited outside while inmates inside used contraband cell phones to call 911 themselves. One inmate later told the Associated Press that bodies were literally stacked on top of each other. The 7 men who died were Eddie Casey Gaskins, Joshua Jenkins, Cornelius McClary, Michael Millage, DeMonte Rivera, Corey Scott, and Raymond Angelo Scott. The county coroner, Larry Logan, said most of them bled to death from stab and cutting wounds, and that some had been beaten. A prison systems consultant told Reuters it was the deadliest riot at an American prison since 1993, when 9 inmates and 1 guard died at a facility in Lucasville, Ohio. 25 years. The corrections director, Brian Sterling, explained the cause the next day, and his answer is worth hearing in full. "Our preliminary investigation indicates this was all about territory," he said. It's all about contraband. It's all about cell phones. These folks are fighting over real money and real territory. 7 men died over cell phones in a building the state controls in a county with 16,000 residents. In December of 2020, the Attorney General announced a 79-count indictment against 29 men. 20 had been sentenced by early last year. The Department of Corrections paid $6 million to settle 81 separate cases. And the town of Bishopville is still there. 3,000 people, losing about 1% of them a year, out on Highway 15, with the water tower and the courthouse and the prison sitting on the edge of it. The people who work inside that building are from Bishopville and the towns around it. Corrections work in a rural county isn't a career anybody picks over better options. It's frequently the only thing paying a living wage for 30 miles, which is exactly why a prison ends up in a county like Lee to begin with. If you live in Bishopville, none of this happened to you. It happened about 4 miles up the road, over the course of one night, in a building your taxes pay for. So that's the 12. The strange part, once you've been through all of them, is that hardly any of these places look like anything. Drive Ridgeland and you're looking at an exit ramp. Drive Yamasee and you're looking at pine trees and a water tower. Hampton is a courthouse and a law office that never needed a sign on the door. Whatever you'd guess about a South Carolina town from the road, the court file is going to be further from it than you think. And look at what actually did the damage in most of these. Not a stranger in an alley. A police chief in Utahville, an officer that 6 departments had already fired, a family that held one office for 87 years, and a state agency that let 7 men die over the course of 8 hours and then paid $6 million to settle it. That's why the names were in here all the way down, and not just the rates. Every town on this list has people in it right now who love it, who are working on it, and who will tell you the headlines aren't the whole story. They're right about that. But the record is still the record, and it's worth reading before you buy a house off a pretty photograph. There's another 12 on this channel about the towns in this state people flat out hate, and why. Watch that one next. 2 of them turn up in court records that would have fit here just as well.